So, you want to get ahead. Maybe you're in the midst of your GCSE summer, or you're in the younger years and you simply want to prepare for a good academic year ahead. Today I'm going to be going through how exactly I managed to self-study many years of content at school. This method helped me get 11 grade 9s at GCSE and 4 A-stars predicted at A-level. And so I'll be sharing my framework and exactly how I did it so you guys can achieve your goals too. Let's go. But quickly, before we talk about the most effective methods, let's quickly talk about why you should be interested in self-studying. Self-studying means you're learning the content before you officially learn it at school. It means that the classroom acts only as a review and revision, and this means that your understanding of the topics will be so deep that in an exam, barely anything will be able to trip you up. So the first key idea you need to understand is that the specification is the most important document for any of your years of study. But what is a specification? The specification is the list of topics that you're expected to learn for your exams and essentially tells you the content that you can be examined on in your final exam. And therefore, if you use this as a framework for your work, it's pretty much impossible to go wrong and you can be confident that you've learned everything that will be covered in any exams. Therefore, if you want to effectively self-study, you need to obtain this specification. For GCSEs and A-levels, this should be easy. As long as you know your school's exam board for each of your subjects, you can simply go onto the internet and find the specification on the exam board's website. If you're in younger years and you're studying for end of years, you may need to ask older pupils or see if you can somehow obtain the specification from your school, as these will vary from school to school as they're not official qualifications. If you're unsure, make sure to ask your school about which board you're doing, as the specification that you use in your self-study will be vital. So once you've obtained the specification, the next step, which is really helpful, is to obtain a textbook. Again, for GCSE and A-level, this is easier. So for my A-levels, I bought this one, which is my chemistry textbook, and also this one, which is for AS Physics. So essentially, when you know your exam board, you can simply go to any big store or Amazon, type in the subject and the exam board, and there'll be tons of options. Textbooks are unfortunately quite expensive since they are a huge trove of information. So it can sometimes be more budget friendly to get these secondhand or see if you can buy them off an older pupil who has maybe just finished their exams. The best thing about these textbooks is that they're written with the specification in mind, so each of the chapters will correspond exactly to a spec point. So now you've obtained your specification and the textbook, now it comes to making notes. Now this will definitely feel very daunting, especially if you're self-studying. It'll be hard to decide where you need to start. But thankfully the specification and the textbook together will help greatly with this. First of all, have a quick flick through the specification to familiarise yourself with the modules and the different sections of content that you will encounter. Often, they're split up into big topic blocks. For example, there may be an overarching unit, and then within that unit there may be smaller sub-themes that link to the overall theme. First of all, pick a unit that you want to start with. You don't necessarily have to start at the beginning. For example, if you look through the different units and you find one that sounds easier or you feel more confident with, by all means start with that one. Working through the first couple of units will feel daunting as it's a process that you've never experienced before, but with time it'll definitely get easier. So you want to be starting with a particular unit, you want to look at the different specification points, and you want to be going through your textbook and finding the exact pieces of information that correspond to that spec point. Let me show you an example. So we have 4.1.1 basic concepts. So we go to our textbook. So you can see we're on module 4. If we turn the page, it even says specification reference 4.1.1. So we know that this information corresponds to this part of the specification. We can even go further and match up the specific spec points. For example, here it says we have to apply UPAC rules of nomenclature. And we go down here, we turn the page, suddenly we have nomenclature. And so we use the specification as a framework, and then we use this textbook information and we write this down in our notes. Then we know that we have all the relevant information that we need for this portion of the spec. And now comes to the writing of the notes. The fundamental principle here is not to just blindly copy down everything that's written in the textbook word for word and let it all go over your head. That is no use whatsoever, as you're basically just rewriting a textbook. Instead, you want to read through the text once, twice, 3 times and fully absorb what it is that they're telling you. Once you've read through it and you have a general grasp of the information, close the textbook and try and summarise what you've just read in your own head, explaining it in your own words. If you get stuck at any point, reopen the textbook and try and clarify. Furthermore, something that really helps in conjunction with this is using YouTube videos. There are countless YouTube videos and YouTube channels that are really good at explaining certain topics, and so if you can't quite get your head around it when it's written on paper, try and find the corresponding YouTube video. But the key here is not just to rely on YouTube, as the YouTube videos may not exactly be tailored to your specific specification, and that's why you're using the textbook to find the general information that you need to know and using YouTube to hone in any doubts or queries that you may have. Once you've done this, try again to summarise all the information in your head so you're properly learning it and you're not just parroting it. This will really help you to nail down the concepts, many of which are very difficult, rather than just blindly learning. Once you feel you have a general idea, then feel free to open the textbook and copy down any nice sentences that you may find into your own notes. When you write, think about each word that you're saying and convince yourself that you understand it. A particular pertinent point with self-study is if you have any doubts, clarify these to yourself in your own notes, preferably in a different colour. This is an example of how mine looked. So this is an example from my A-level chemistry notes about gas chromatography. I've written the bulk of the information from the textbook in this blue colour here. Then I've added any supplementary information or areas where I've had doubts in purple here. The great thing about your notes is that they're yours. You can personalise them. You can add more information and more support with topics that you find harder, and perhaps go less heavy on the words on topics that you know you understand. Don't feel the need to write every single point in the exact same amount of detail. This will definitely help you save time, especially if you're on a tight timescale, for example, the summer. So now that's the basic framework of how you want to be structuring your notes. And now you just have to repeat that for every single module, and suddenly you'll have a perfect collection of notes that you fully understand and that are tailored to you. But that's not all. Something that I found really pertinent was something called the forgetting curve. It's a psychological model showing how the human brain rapidly loses newly learned information over time without conscious review. In fact, studies have shown that without reinforcement, people typically forget about 50% of new material within the first hour and 70 to 90% within a whole week. This means that although you may feel you've understood a topic fully when you first learn it, when you come back the next day, it's totally normal to look at it and be like, what on earth is this talking about? And that's why review is more important than ever. Although getting the content down and learnt is important, reviewing old content is just as important, so make sure you balance these. For example, plan your day in a way that perhaps in the morning you're writing your new content, you're learning new topics, but in the afternoon you're rereading your notes from the previous day and you're reconsolidating them in your head. This will ensure that you get the balance between learning your new content and not forgetting your old one. Active recall is really important for this. You can use blurting, which is where you just write down everything you remember about the topic, or you can even just try and say out loud everything that you've learned the previous day or pretend to teach it to someone. Once you've reached the end of a module, congratulations, you're getting closer to the end. But something that's really fundamental about this is that this unlocks a whole new world of revision material for you, past paper questions. Once you've learned a whole module, you'll realise you're now able to do entire packs of past paper questions. So my advice is to hop onto Physics and Maths Tutor, which genuinely was a godsend during my revision and I highly recommend you use. Scroll, find your subject, find your exam board, and download a bunch of past papers. You can either print these out or do these digitally and just work through them. This is the ultimate active recall, and this will really help the information stick in your head. As far as possible, do not try and skimp out on these. These are honestly one of the most fundamental parts of ensuring that you retain everything that you've learnt. And once you've done this, you've pretty much unlocked the entire framework. Repeat this for all your modules and you'll be on your way. There are definitely topics that are difficult and you may need real people to help you with, in which case you can go onto forums or maybe even get a tutor if you're really stuck. Feel free to join my Discord server and I can answer any questions you may have and provide any advice, as sometimes you just need a person to unlock that key bit of difficulty for you and then you're on your way. But remember always that because you're self-studying, when you start school again, you'll be learning these topics all over again. So if there's a topic you didn't fully understand, don't fret over it and don't stress too much, as you'll be taught that exact same topic by a teacher really soon. And that's one of the beauties of getting started early. It means that when you're in the classroom, you never really have to struggle as much as you did by yourself. And when you're by yourself, you have all the time in the world and all the resources to clarify your doubts. And then ultimately, when you go to school and learn this content in the classroom, use this as an opportunity to add to your notes. Often, teachers provide valuable insights that you can't find anywhere else. And so make sure you're still paying attention in your lessons, as you can often find new little bits of information or exam tips that you can then add to your notes to improve these further. So I hope this helped at least a little bit. I wish you guys the best of luck for your academic journeys. I hope you achieve everything that you set out to achieve, and I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.